Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the world of Indian corporate law.
Which, believe me, can be a lot more interesting than it sounds.
I'll take your word for it. We're looking at MB Malls and their ambitious business tower project. You know, the one that was supposed to be this big fancy complex with corporate offices and a five-star hotel.
Right, and it's a perfect example of how India's insolvency system is changing.
Oh, so we're not talking about like the old way of just shutting down companies that are in trouble.
Exactly. The IBC, which is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016, is all about trying to save companies, not just liquidate them.
Okay, so it's less tear it down and more let's see if we can fix this. That sounds like a pretty big shift for the Indian business world.
It is. Before the IBC, these cases could drag on forever. Creditors rarely got all their money back, and the whole thing could just destroy businesses completely. The IBC tries to fix that by giving a clear structure and deadlines for dealing with insolvency.
Makes sense. So to figure out this whole MB Mall situation, we've got a ton of documents, court orders, replies from the guy appointed to sort through this mess. What's his title
The
again?
resolution professional, or RP for short.
Right, the RP. So we've got replies from the RP, arguments from different people involved. It's like a financial thriller, but in real life.
It really is.
Mm.
And like any good thriller, we've got a whole cast of characters. The Bank of Baroda is our main creditor, trying to get their money back. Then there's MB Malls itself, drowning in debt. And let's not forget the people who bought into the business tower dream.
Oh, right, the LRTs. They must be pretty stressed out.
Definitely. And then you've got the suspended directors and other creditors all wanting their piece of the pie. It's a mess.
So where do we even begin with a story this complicated? It seems like it's been going on forever.
Well, kind of has. It all started back in 2006. MB Malls got the green light to build Business Tower, and everyone was excited.
Huh.
Champagne wishes and caviar dreams, as they say.
Yeah, I can imagine. But then reality set in.
Exactly. Fast forward to 2011, 2012, and the cracks start to show. Loans, more loans, restructuring, the classic signs of trouble.
And that's when the bank steps in and says, okay, this isn't looking good.
Pretty much. In 2012, the bank labels the account a non-performing asset, an NPA in banking lingo.
And that's bad, right?
You bet. It means the loan payments are way behind and the bank's starting to sweat. So by 2015, they get serious and use the Sarfazi Act.
Surfazi? I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what that is.
Don't worry, most people don't. It's basically a tool that lets secured creditors take action to recover their money without going through the usual long court process. Think of it as a fast track for creditors to get what they're owed.
So things are getting real for MB Malls. They can't just ignore the bank anymore.
Nope. And as if things weren't bad enough, their initial land license gets canceled in 2017.
Oh, come on. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Right. Although they did fight that cancellation later. But then things take a really interesting turn. In 2018, another creditor, Oriental Bank of Commerce, decides to get in on the action and files their own insolvency application against MB Malls.
Whoa, hold on. So now there are two separate attempts to, like, take control of the company?
It happens sometimes. Creditors might see a chance to work out a deal outside of the formal insolvency process. It's all about trying to recover their money, after all.
So did it work out for Oriental Bank of Commerce? Did they get their money?
They did. They ended up withdrawing the application because they reached a settlement with MB Malls.
So problem solved. Not so fast.
Exactly. This settlement didn't magically solve MB Malls' money problems. They were still in deep.
Oof. And to complicate matters even more, 2019 brought about that whole MSME classification in India, right? Micro, small, and medium enterprises or something like that.
Yeah, and that becomes a big deal in the MB Malls case. See, the IBC has this rule, Section 240A, that gives MSMEs special treatment during insolvency proceedings. It's designed to give them a fighting chance.
Okay, so I'm getting the feeling that this seemingly straightforward insolvency case might have some loopholes, and a certain suspended director might be trying to use them. Am I picking up what you're putting down?
You're good at this. But before we get into that juicy bit, let's not forget about Bank of Baroda, who's still waiting to get paid.
Right, they're the main players in all of this.
Yep, and in 2020, they decide to take another shot at resolving this by filing their own insolvency petition under the IBC.
So after trying other things, Bank of Baroda finally says, let's do this IBC thing.
Pretty much. Remember, the IBC was still pretty new, and it took some time for everyone to figure out how it worked and how it could help.
That makes sense. It's 2020, the IBC is chosen. Is this thing finally going somewhere?
It is, but not without a couple more years of drama. It takes until 2022 for the NCLT, the National Company Law Tribunal, to officially accept the insolvency petition. This is a big deal because it officially kicks off that formal insolvency resolution process, the CIRP as it's called.
Okay, so it's 2022. The IBC is officially in play. What happens next? Does some white knight investor magically appear with a suitcase full of cash to bail out MB Malls?
Not quite. What happens is the NCLT appoints someone called an interim resolution professional, an IRP, to take charge of the situation.
An IRP, is that like a temporary CEO brought in to stabilize things and figure out a game plan?
That's a great way to put it. They're like a financial detective, figuring out how bad the situation is, gathering claims from creditors, and seeing if there's any chance of rescuing MB Malls.
Okay, so what does this financial detective do first?
Transparency is key, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the IRP puts out a public notice, one of those announcements you see in newspapers.
Yeah, I think I've seen those. Usually for things like auctions, right?
Exactly. They have to announce it publicly so that anyone who's owed money by MB Malls knows to come forward and make their claim. In this case, the IRP put the notice in two big newspapers, the Financial Express and Gensata.
Ah, okay, so they're not messing around, making sure everyone knows what's going on.
Right, and that's just one part of it. The IRP also forms this group called the Committee of Creditors, or COSI for short.
The COSI, that sounds important.
Oh, they're very important. Think of them as the board of directors for this whole insolvency process. They have the final say on whether to accept or reject any plan to rescue the company.
So it's not just the bank calling all the shots.
Not at all. And to make sure everyone's voice is heard, the IBC allows for an authorized representative to be appointed for specific groups. In this case, they appointed one for all those Alatees who invested in the business tower.
Oh, that's good to know. So those individual investors weren't just forgotten about.
Nope. The IBC is designed to be more inclusive, giving all stakeholders a seat at the table. Now, remember that whole MSME classification we talked about earlier?
Oh, right. The special category for certain businesses. It's all coming back to me now.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Hit me with it.
So a new resolution professional, Abhimanyu Mittal, takes over the case. First things first, he sends out an SOS, basically asking if anyone out there has a plan to save MB Malls.
So he's like, any good ideas out there? Anyone?
Pretty much. And guess who comes knocking?
Don't tell me. The suspended director of MB Malls.
You got it. He sees this as his chance to worm his way back into the company. Because if MB Malls could somehow be classified as an MSME, he might actually be allowed to submit a plan himself.
Wait, seriously? The guy who might have driven the company into the ground in the first place could potentially get back in control.
Well, there are rules, of course. Section 240A, the one about MSMEs, does have some restrictions, but it shows how tricky this whole thing can be. You want to give struggling businesses a chance, but you also don't want the people responsible for the mess to take advantage.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what happened? Did this director manage to pull a fast one?
He tried to. It gets even juicier. The resolution professional initially hinted that registering as an MSME might be possible.
Oh, no way. Talk about a glimmer of hope, only to have it.
Snatched away. That's right, the RP ended up rejecting the director's proposal.
What? Why? I thought he was leaning towards letting him back in.
Well, the RP argued that letting a suspended director, especially one who might have contributed to the company's problems, submit a plan would go against the whole point of the IBC.
I see. So it would be like rewarding bad behavior, basically.
Exactly. Of course, the director wasn't too happy about this. Cue the legal challenges, the arguments, the counter-arguments. It was like a courtroom drama.
Oh, I bet. So what did the NCLT, the big boss, have to say about all of this?
The NCLT ultimately sided with the RP, shutting down the director's attempts to get back in the game. They made it very clear. The IBC is not about giving ex-directors a backdoor entry, especially if they mess things up in the first place.
That sounds like a pretty clear message to me. No free passes.
Right. They basically said, if you want to be treated as an MSME, you should have thought about that before. You can't just use it as a loophole during insolvency.
Okay, that makes sense. So no redemption arc for our suspended director. But what about the LTs? What about MB Malls itself? Is there any hope for them?
Well, a group of new investors steps up with a resolution plan, and the COSI actually approves it unanimously.
Wow. Okay, so there's still a chance for MB Malls to actually make a comeback. Tell me more about this plan.
It's a pretty solid plan. They propose a structured way to pay off all the creditors, the bank, the LTs, everyone.
Wait, even the LTs get paid after all this time?
Yep. The IBC is all about being fair and making sure everyone gets as much value as possible. The plan also includes finishing the business tower construction and giving the company a whole new financial structure.
Wow, they're really going all in on this. Not just a quick fix, but a real attempt to turn things around.
It seems that way. And to keep everything above board, the NCLT approves the plan with some conditions. It has to be done within 365 days. There's a clear payment schedule for everyone, and it even set up a monitoring committee to oversee everything.
So it's like having a referee to make sure everyone plays by the rules.
Exactly. And this committee isn't messing around. They've got representatives from the new investors, the bank, and even the resolution professional himself.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm starting to feel a little optimistic about this, but this is the deep dive, and we both know these things rarely go smoothly. Is there a final twist lurking around the corner?
You know it. Just when you think things are back on track, another obstacle appears, and you won't believe where this one comes from. The town planning department.
The town planning department. Seriously. What do they have to do with MB Mall's insolvency case?
Well, get this. Just as MB Malls is finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, the town planning department swoops in and cancels their land license for the business tower.
You're kidding. Why?
They cited some sort of bureaucratic technicality.
No way. After a resolution plan has already been approved. Talk about bad timing. This seems incredibly unfair.
It does, doesn't it? And it really highlights the importance of that moratorium we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, the one that's supposed to protect companies under insolvency resolution from actions that could derail everything.
Right. So this land license cancellation must have been a major violation of that protection.
Absolutely. It's like they completely ignored the fact that MB Malls was in the middle of this whole insolvency process.
So naturally, the resolution professional wasn't going to just let this slide, right?
Of course not. He challenged it immediately, arguing that it went against the entire purpose of the IBC and threw a wrench in the carefully crafted rescue plan.
I would be fuming if I were him. So, what happened? Did the town planning department back down, or did this turn into another legal battle?
Thankfully, common sense, or rather, judicial wisdom prevailed. The NCLT stepped in again and ruled in favor of the resolution professional, overturning the town planning department's decision.
Yes. It's about time someone put their foot down. What happened to the land license cancellation?
Gone. Revoked. The NCLT even ordered the town planning department to take down any notices about the cancellation.
It sounds like the NCLT is serious about making sure the IBC works the way it's supposed to.
They are. And to further prove their point, they even gave MB Malls some extra time to get back on track. They excluded the time lost because of this land license mess from the overall CREP timeline.
Wow, that's huge. They actually acknowledged that this whole thing was a waste of everyone's time and energy, except maybe for the town planning department, that is.
You got it. The MB Malls case is the perfect example of how the IBC, while being incredibly useful for resolving insolvency, doesn't exist in a bubble. You have these external factors, bureaucratic hurdles, and even attempts to take advantage of the system. It's a complex ecosystem.
It makes you realize how important it is to understand all of this legal stuff, even if you're not a lawyer or a business tycoon, right?
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, as they say. The more you understand about things like the moratorium, the NCLT, and the whole MSME classification, the better equipped you are to navigate the business world.
Couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this roller coaster of a case, what are the key takeaways our listeners should remember?
The biggest one is that the IBC is a game changer. It's not about punishing struggling companies. It's about giving them a chance to restructure and get back on their feet.
Which benefits everyone in the long run. Businesses get a second chance, creditors have a better shot at recovering their money, and the economy avoids those massive hits that happen when companies go belly up.
Exactly. The second takeaway is the importance of transparency and efficiency. The IBC has these built-in mechanisms like public disclosures, creditor involvement, and those strict timelines that help keep things fair and moving forward.
No more dragging these cases out for years and years.
Right. Third, as we've seen with the resolution professional in the MB Malls case, you need people who really know what they're doing to navigate this complex landscape.
They're like the unsung heroes, right? Dealing with all the legal and financial stuff and trying to keep everyone happy, all while working against the clock.
Well said. And finally, the MB Malls saga shows us that while the IBC is still a work in progress, it has the potential to really change the way India does business. More financial stability, more accountability, and more opportunities for companies to thrive.
I like the sound of that. Well, that was quite a ride, wasn't it? We've gone from uncertainty to cautious optimism, with a few legal detours along the way.
That's the IBC for you, always full of twists and turns. But it's definitely an exciting time to be following these developments.
That's for sure. And for our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of the world of corporate insolvency and how it impacts the economy as a whole.
It's one of those things that might seem complicated at first, but once you grasp the basics, it's fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Well said. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and who knows, maybe we'll inspire you to do a little deep dive of your own.